The NBA trade deadline did not disappoint. I'm Coy Camiscioli from Philly Sports Talk. I'm going to break down all the major moves, give my grades for each team, and just give a full breakdown of each trade that kind of made some ripple effects around the NBA. So I want to apologize in advance if you're watching via YouTube. I have my notes up. I took handwritten notes on each trade. So if I'm looking down a lot, that's what I'm looking at. But yeah, I'm not going to do every single trade, just all the big ones. So we'll start off with the Jazz and Grizzlies, and this one was kind of surprising. The Jazz, they get Jaren Jackson Jr. and a couple minor players. They give up Walter Clayton Jr., Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, George Niang, and 3 first-round picks. So it's not a bad return for the Grizzlies. I will not lie. I'm not quite sure what the Jazz are kind of cooking up here with Jaren Jackson Jr. I really like this side for Memphis. The Ja Morant era with Jaren Jackson Jr. as one of his sidekicks just did not go the way we thought it would. I never thought it would go very far, but they just never really accomplished much of anything. So 3 first-round picks plus a couple of younger guys, I don't mind it at all for the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm okay with this trade. As for the Jazz, I am a little confused as to what they're trying to build. It's going to be interesting seeing Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen play together. But listen, either side's not terrible. Eventually, these teams that are not in the biggest of markets and have sucked need to buy. So I'm okay with the Jazz trying to make a move, trying to become a little relevant. My grades for this deal, I give the Grizzlies a B+. I really think it's a good return for them. As I said, the Ja Morant era with Jackson has not worked. Jazz, B-. It's technically not a bad trade. Jaren Jackson Jr. can do a lot of things, but they're nowhere close to a championship window. They're so far. So I'm not too sure what the thinking is here. But again, I am a fan of teams trying to buy eventually and try to get out of just purgatory. So we'll see what happens. Coming up, this one I've done a full podcast on because this is a Philly sports podcast. So if you want to hear a full breakdown on it and my true feelings, go listen to it. But Jared McCain to the Thunder. I was really mad about this. I've had a week to finally simmer down a little bit. The Sixers get a 2026 first-round pick that is owned by the Houston Rockets. They also get 3 second-round picks as the Thunder get Jared McCain. I just think this was just such a terrible trade for the Sixers. And the Thunder, they get a nice, really good young player in McCain, and they just get deeper as a team as the reigning NBA champs. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I'm going to give my grades in a second. But again, if you want to hear more on this trade, there's a full episode on it on my podcast. So I gave the Sixers an F, and that's not biased. If you just look at their current situation and what has gone on with that team, they were in no reason to sell, let alone one of their better young guys. And I give the Thunder an A. They just got better as a team. They got deeper. And I just like the move for them. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Go listen to the full podcast if you're interested to hear more Jared McCain talk. This next one was kind of surprising, and it kind of developed pretty fast. The Cavaliers, they get James Harden. For the Clippers, they get Darius Garland and a second-round pick. It's an intriguing one because I'm very interested to see how James Harden and Donovan Mitchell work together. Harden has not been known to be the greatest performer. I think he gets a little hate for some of his performances back in the late 2010s decade. But as of late, even when he was with the Sixers, he was just really inconsistent. He would have an unbelievable night carrying the team, and then the next game be pretty bad. So I'm intrigued to see how this works, especially come playoff time. But I don't mind it. Darius Garland has not really been the guy that Cleveland thought he was going to be, which is a shame. Now he's young. He's got a lot of room to develop still, and that's why I like it for the Clippers. I think they're building a little bit for the future. Now, the downside here is that the Clippers were starting to get hot with, they were starting to get hot with Kawhi Leonard and everything. They also shipped out Ivica Zubac, which I'll get to that trade as well. So it's a shame for Kawhi Leonard because he's stuck in LA, helpless now. But I don't mind this. For the Cavs, I give them a B. Again, I have a little concerns of Harden alongside Mitchell. I want to watch it. I know they played a couple games together already, but I haven't yet to see it together. And for the Clippers, I gave them a B+. I think it's good to get a good young player back and not necessarily all picks. I think Darius Garland has a lot of room to grow, but it just hasn't fit the standard for what Cleveland was looking for, which is a shame because I wanted to see it work out for them. But again, I like this for both sides. Harden has barely missed any games this year. He's been really reliable, which is usually not his kind of basketball. But I like Garland too, so we'll see. That's what I got on that one. This isn't a major one, so I didn't have a full breakdown on it. Now, ironically, I'm recording this after the Sixers-Knicks game. Jose Alvarado to the Knicks, and he just tore the Sixers up, it was really embarrassing. But I like that move for the Knicks. It was a really cheap trade. I thought that more teams should be in on Jose Alvarado. I think he brings a lot to the table, especially on defense. And he proved to me tonight against the Sixers of why he was such an important ad for this Knicks team. So I'm a fan of it. But moving on, this wasn't a crazy one either. The Hornets, they get Kobe White and Mike Conley, as the Bulls get Colin Sexton and 3 second-round picks. Again, nothing too crazy here. Kobe White's averaging 18.5 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, right around. That's all around averages. So listen. I don't think it's a bad deal for the Hornets. I kind of like it. The Hornets have been moving up in the standings a little bit. They currently occupy a playing spot. They're on a nice little stretch of basketball right now. And I like the kind of youth core that they have with LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Colin Knippel. And I think Kobe White could be a big help for them. And Colin Sexton just wasn't really doing it. So I'm going to give the Hornets an A-. I was actually a pretty big fan of the steal. As for the Bulls, I'm going to give them a C+. If you think back to 3 to 4 years ago when they've had Levine, Vucevic, DeMar, Lonzo, all these guys, and they just got no picks for them, and they just didn't know how to sell on these players at the right time. It's really embarrassing that they were unable, or that they failed this badly to make any moves. So we'll stay with the Bulls going on to this one, Celtics and Bulls. The Celtics, they get Nikola Vucevic and a second-round pick. The Bulls get Anthony Simons and a 2026 second. The Celtics was a 2027 second. I don't mind this for both sides because I don't think Vucevic is worth a first-round pick, maybe one first-round pick, if that. But Anthony Simons is a bucket. He's a really good player. He can make some really tough shots. But at the same time, the Celtics really needed a big. And I think that getting Nikola Vucevic was a really realistic yet good trade target for the Celtics. And I give my hats off to them trying to go all in, even with, up in the air of where Jason Tatum is at. They definitely outperformed what we thought they were going to be without Tatum. We didn't think they were going to be bad, but I mean, they're the number 2 seed right now in the East without Tatum. So kind of crazy to think about, and getting Vucevic, I definitely think helps their cause. Again, Simmons, he's a good basketball player, very good offensively. I think he can maybe shine in Chicago without really anybody there to get in his way, but we'll see. Celtics, I give them an A. I like this. I really like this return for them. Bulls, I give them a B. Again, I just think it's a good fit for Vucevic there, and we'll see how him and the Celtics do down the stretch. Vucevic also, this is worth noting, he shoots 37% from 3, which kind of fits Boston's mold well. They're a very good shooting team. They throw up a lot of threes, so he's going to fit in well there. But yeah, let's move on. Pacers, they get a Vika Zubac and Kobe Brown. The Clippers, they get Benedict Mathurin and Isaiah Jackson, and a 2026 first, a 2029 first, and a 2028 second. So this was a pretty crazy deal because obviously the Pacers are without Halliburton for the whole year. They're at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. They're not going to even make the play-in this year. But they're clearly planning for the future with Tyrese Halliburton. They're getting him a nice player on the pick and roll. And I think Zubac is good. This is a good addition. His tenure with the Clippers was pretty solid. He's a good player. Obviously, the Pacers gave up on a guy like Benedict Mathurin, who had some moments for them in the playoffs last year, but he also had some weaknesses, and that became quite, blaring in the playoffs. But I'm a fan of this move. The Pacers, it would have been easy to do nothing considering how bad they've been this year without their star player, but I like this. They're looking towards next year. They're trying to get back to relevancy and maybe get back to the playoffs and make another run at it. So I'm a fan. I gave the Pacers a B-, but that doesn't mean I think it was a bad deal. I gave the Clippers an A-, actually. So the way that I talked about this trade might make you think that those grades should have been swapped. But again, I told you guys earlier on, I'm a fan of teams trying to, still make moves and buying and not just staying in purgatory, which the Pacers very well could have been heading towards that after this season. Halliburton's a great player, but I'm not sure how many players can fix what this Pacers team is right now. So Clippers getting 2 first-round picks and a second for Zubac and a good young player. It's not a bad return at all. It didn't work out for Zubac in LA, and the Clippers found out that Harden wasn't going to be playing, had personal reasons he wanted out. So I'm a fan of this for both sides. I'm okay with both sides, but I think the Clippers got a nice return in this one. So moving on, this is another interesting one. Another big man going out. Kristaps Porzingis to the Warriors. The Hawks, they get Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield. This is kind of similar to the last one. I think this one's a little more balanced. The Warriors are doing everything they can to help Curry and maximize what's left in his window here with Golden State. So I love that they're trying hard. They're a little late to the party of trying to get a good big man on this team. They failed with the draft choice of James Wiseman, and they've just never really been that reliant on centers. You're seeing Kevon Looney anchoring teams, going back to even a decade ago, just some other guys that just were not very big names. And I'm okay with them trying to make a move right now to maximize what Curry has left, but it just might be, I think it's a little too late. It's a shame that Jimmy Butler went down with the ACL injury. I think Curry, Butler, and Porzingis would be pretty cool together. The problem is Porzingis, he just doesn't play, and I just have my doubts with him being healthy with this team. Even during Boston's playoff run a couple years ago, he wasn't playing in every game. He was hurt a lot last year. So it's a solid deal for both teams, but again, Kristaps doesn't play enough, and he's just not very reliable because of that. So I end up giving both teams a B. Jonathan Kuminga is obviously a young guy who has some upside. That tenure did not work out in Golden State the way we thought it would. And so I think a B was a rightful grade for each of these teams. And I got one more trade left, and this was a huge one. Let me just check the next page, but I think this is the last trade I did. Yeah, this was the last big one. Anthony Davis going to the Wizards, along with D'Angelo Russell, Dante Exum, and Jalen Hardy. The Mavericks, they get Chris Middleton, A.J. Johnson, Tyus Jones, Marvin Bagley, a 2026 first, a 2030 first, and 3 second-round picks. This was another shocking one. Around a little over a month ago, the Wizards traded for Trae Young. They gave up next to nothing. And here they are trading for Anthony Davis, which is kind of crazy. Trae Young and Anthony Davis, that could be a very interesting duo next year. The Wizards have said that Anthony Davis will not return this year. The Wizards weren't competing for anything anyway, and he's just going to focus on getting healthy for next season. So I think this is kind of a cool move for the Wizards. They're just trying to, again, a lot of teams trying to get out of that purgatory realm at this NBA trade deadline, and I'm okay. I'm kind of okay with it. Do I think Trae Young and Anthony Davis are going to deliver a championship to Washington? No, it's not going to happen. But you got to win games at some point. You got to sell tickets. You got to make your team relevant, and maybe you have other players see these two guys doing well. Maybe they win 40 games, and somebody wants to go to Washington because of that, and that could be the missing piece. So I'm a fan of this move for the Wizards. They had to give up a couple firsts, but it's not terrible. It really isn't. As for the Mavs, just the whole situation is kind of embarrassing because of the Luka Doncic trade, and then they trade Anthony Davis, who they got in that trade a year later. It's honestly disgraceful what has been done to that franchise. If I was a Mavericks fan and they traded Luka Doncic, and they did trade Luka Doncic, but if I was a Mavericks fan, I would have been so sick, man. I can honestly not even imagine what that felt like. So I give the Mavs a D. Just terrible ownership the last couple years for them after making the finals just a couple short seasons ago. And the Wizards, I give them a B-. Again, I'm kind of a fan of this move. I'm interested to see what Anthony Davis and Trae Young are able to do next year. But yeah, guys, that's all I got. It was a very interesting trade deadline. A lot of surprises. A lot of teams who weren't really looking to contend making some moves, such as the Wizards. The Pacers obviously made a couple. The Jazz, the two biggest moves were the Wizards getting Anthony Davis, and then, honestly, you could throw Jaren Jackson Jr. in there into the Jazz. Obviously, the James Harden one too, but a couple really irrelevant teams making some big moves and kind of making some ripple effects around the league. But that's all I got, guys. If you're a big NBA guy, stay tuned for over the All-Star break. I'm going to have podcasts coming out on my top 10 at each position so far this season. So each podcast on point guard, shooting guard, small forwards, etc. And I'll go from there. But hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave a comment, subscribe if you want more NBA content and sports content in general.